This is Kung Fu Pizza Party, and I'm your host, Brandon Knight, and today I am here to review Zen in the Martial Arts by Joe Hyams. That's right, folks, got a book review for you all today. Here on Kung Fu Pizza Party, I seek to deliver high-flying action in 30 minutes or less and serve some wisdom one slice at a time. But occasionally, here on the show, I do go over that 30-minute mark. When that happens, I have to take on a challenge to repay my debt and restore my honor. That way I may be the podcast host with the most amount of honor. And recently I went over on an episode, and as such, I took on a challenge. One of the ones I did last year, I wanted to bring back for this year, and that is to take a day in spiritual retreat, meditation, reflection, things like that. And since I was headed on a vacation that was going to allow me a lot of downtime to sit and reflect, to read, all in the comfort of a nice, cozy home with a fireplace and a nice little couch. It was lovely. Thanks for asking, folks. I thought that this would be a good time to accomplish this challenge and to read a book that's been sitting on my shelf for a moment. And that takes us today to right now, fulfilling this challenge. Hooray! I still owe you two other ones, but hooray! I will get caught up one day, I promise. But to help set the table, so at one point last year, I sat down and conducted a series of just like inquiries with people on different platforms, different people, the whole bit, to did some web search, the whole bit, all different kinds of research to put together the ultimate martial art reading list, the ultimate martial artist library, because there are quite a few books, and there's a lot that come up as must-reads, but there are a lot of books ranging on a wide variety of different subjects, styles, philosophy, the whole bit. There's a lot to potentially read and a lot to potentially sift through as well. So I threw a wide net, like I said, talked to a couple different people, did some research, went into a group that I'm a part of that's all about martial art books to get together try to put together like the definitive list of these are the ones that every martial artist has to read, regardless of style, philosophy. These are the ones that, hey, if you're a martial artist, you should read this. And we've talked about a couple. I've talked about a couple here on the show already. The Art of Peace, just this past January, Joshua Knoll was on the show to help me talk about the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and Zen in the Martial Arts is another one that comes up as an absolute must-read. And truly, you will not find a bad thing that anybody has ever said about this book. Until today. Today, you are going to hear someone say some not so nice things about this book. I think ultimately in the end, the book is good. Like I read somewhere, it may have been on Goodreads, a review that stated that by way of an introduction to the subject of Zen, this is a good beginner starting point, which is encouraging to me because at the end of the day, despite some of the things that did come up in this book, I did really enjoy dipping my toe into this. Other martial art philosophical things and spiritualism I am familiar with. Zen is one of those things that I was not. I was not very well educated on the subject of Zen going into this book. And because of that, I actually read a majority of the book before I actually went and then did some research on what is like the textbook definition of Zen. Because this book isn't it's not a textbook on Zen as much as it is the different facets of Zen and how it comes up in the martial arts and in life. And so I kind of wanted to put together my own working definition of Zen before I actually just got like the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of Zen. And the one review that was like, hey, this is a good starting point, that was encouraging to me, because I was left in a place where, like, okay, I want to explore this further. And one book that did also come up as an absolute must read from my list was Zen and the Art of Archery, and I actually had already gone out of my way to purchase this book, so I already have it, and fingers crossed, maybe I'll get to it before the end of the year. If not, I'll prioritize it for 2027, whatever. I also know that Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is a popular book, or at least it used to be a pretty popular book. I also have come across one that's like Zen and R2D2 or something like that. So I know that there are other avenues and ways to research and learn about Zen, because I was interested. I am piqued. My interest has been piqued on this subject. There was just a big part of this book, like almost like the entire second half, that made me go, you lost me here, bud. But it wasn't even really like the Zen part, honestly. Like it was okay, let's get into the book maybe, just to help explain it. So having read this book, I would say that Zen is the process of becoming a whole, true person. It's becoming your true, authentic self, putting aside the industrialization, the constant working, and being a true human being, a human being, not a human doing, that kind of like cheesy thing. That's what Zen is. And maybe because this is on a Christian podcast network, I'll put it in a way for the Christians. Zen and spiritual formation are basically cousins. I would say you're in a process of becoming, like, you're in the process of becoming something. In Christianity, we have the concept of sanctification, that we're becoming in the image of Christ, whereas spiritual formation is more of like you are being shaped into a being, a person, an individual, a human. And Zen really shares a lot of the same things. It's almost like there's a lot of overlap between various philosophies and Eastern religions. The only other thing I really gained from reading the more textbook definition of Zen is that it does come from Buddhism. That was the only other thing that really came up that doesn't come up at all in the book itself. So just to kind of give you like a working idea, at least according to Joe Hyams, what Zen is, he doesn't actually say that verbatim like I did, but basically as you sit with his different stories and teachings that he received on Zen, that's kind of the idea we're working with here, of you are becoming a true person. Now let's talk about our author, because we have a very interesting individual here with us today. Okay, that makes it sound like I'm interviewing him. He's dead. So Joe Hyams is the author of this book. Joe, I'm actually not sure if I'm saying his last name correctly. It could be Hyams. It could be Hams. I don't know. So I'm just going to call him Joe. Joe was a Hollywood reporter in like the 60s and 70s. Along with being a reporter, he wrote a number of books, biographies, works of nonfiction works, historical historical like books, things like that. This is his one and only, as far as I know, this is his one and only book on the subject of martial arts. He took up martial arts during that time period, and as you can imagine, it being the 60s and 70s in Hollywood, he actually got to train with the real who's who of martial art people at the time. 3 of his instructors from this time period include Bruce Lee, Ed Parker, and Bong Soo-han. Now, I'm assuming I don't have to introduce Bruce Lee to you all. Ed Parker, just in case you are more of a casual fan, Ed Parker is the founder of American Kempo Karate and Bong Soo-han, who might honestly be a deep cut even for certain martial artists. Bong Soo-han is considered the father of modern Hapkido. He's the one who brought Hapkido to the United States and famously worked with Tom Laughlin on Billy Jack and actually has a role in the trial of Billy Jack. I think it's The Trial. Either way, so it's one of the Billy Jack sequels. He actually has a role in it as well. So it's a real who's who of people he has trained with. Also, Joe trained in a lot of martial arts. So just from those three alone, you have Jeet Kune Do, American Kempo, and Hapkido. He also mentions training in Taekwondo, Wing Chun, Aikido, and there's two others that escape me. He claims to have trained in 8 different martial arts in about a 20-ish year span, because this book was written, I think it was in the 70s, and his martial art training started like in the 50s. So after about 20 years, he sits down to write this book. And during that time period, he apparently trained in about 8 martial arts. And if you can't hear the hesitation in my voice, I am a little skeptical about that, especially since I can't remember what the other 2 were off the top of my head right now. But, and then I think this kind of gets to some of my issue with the book itself, is that there are things in this book that maybe I'm just being too much of a modernist here. It just kind of comes off as bullshito. Like, I'm sorry, folks. I know this book is like truly beloved. And like I said, the first half is very good. And all the stuff kind of like understanding what Zen is very good. But it takes a turn halfway through that I'm like, okay, you lost me. Along with that, another one of my big complaints about the book, that like, it's a complaint, but I got over it kind of thing, is the writing style. So basically it's a very short book, and each chapter is like, I don't know, 8 pages or less. Like it's usually way less also. And they're all the majority of them are stories. It's a story about him training with one of these many martial arts with one of these many masters, and a story about a teaching that comes up about Zen, and then how he implemented that teaching in the dojo and then in life, or didn't implement it, or in the dojo, or didn't implement it in life, and how he kind of learned from that mistake. And so so that's fine. Like, that totally makes sense given like who he is. And honestly, like, yeah, that I would write a book like that too. Like there's nothing like weird or controversial about that. It's the writing style. And I can only compare it to those posts you see on Facebook, or those tweets of like stories that allegedly happen. And it's like, no, none of this ever happened to anybody in any point in life. A lot of it has to do with the dialogue. It's like nobody talks that way. Nobody is that matter of a fact, straight to the point, or like it's weird. It's weird, and it just makes it feel like most of the stories are either made up, or maybe it's like, and this is like giving him the benefit of the doubt of like, maybe because of the time period and the line of work he was in, this is just like how he wrote stories, and like his way of taking like creative liberty in retelling information. But again, maybe this is just me being far too modern. It just comes off as like, none of this happened. You made all that up, because it it reads like every conversation he ever had with anybody was super profound, and I just don't believe that. Now, as I said, there's a turn about halfway through the book where it starts to become more of just like bullshito, and if you can't guess, this is when he starts talking about training in Aikido. Sorry, Aikido people. Look, I want to believe that every martial art contributes something to the table. And after I read Art of Peace, I do have to say, though, the founder of Aikido, interesting guy. But I will say that, like, I think philosophically, Aikido makes sense. It's very idealistic, I will say, in principle. But there's just some things that come up that I'm like, this is getting far too metaphysical to work. This is getting far too spiritual. We're over spiritualizing things here. And like flow of energy and kai and all this kind of stuff, and like being able to move people or not to be moved because you're centering your energy and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, at best you're just dropping your weight. Or he also talks about, and this one's going to get me in trouble too. So he also starts talking about at one point another very beloved book, one that I was actually very excited to read. But again, it just talks about this story. He brings up this story from this beloved martial art book that like about this time where this master was going to get in was going to meet somebody for a brawl, and the opponent kept like falling down and almost losing consciousness just anytime he made eye contact with the master. And if you're not familiar with that story, that comes from Karate Do, My Way of Life, which is super beloved and probably will get me killed now for saying that. I mean, he's the founder of Shotokan, or at least brought karate from Okinawa to Japan. Like the Grand Master is a big deal. But with that, like, I don't believe that story whatsoever. I'll believe the story of him chopping a bull's horn in half before I believe that story. Like yeah. So it's a good introduction to Zen. I definitely agree with that review, but there's just like, especially on that second half, so much chew the meat and spit most of it. That's just like, it's just not for me. It's going to be a no for me, dog. At the same time, though, I think this is also part of my fuel to dig deeper into Zen and, let this be a part of my growth and journey, because even as a Christian, I agree with this concept of like, we are in the process of becoming true human individuals, and a lot of that comes from deconstructing and I really do think like a putting aside of industrialization and turning back to simplicity and embracing a more natural, but not that kind of like Instagram fitness influence kind of natural thing, but like a more natural like way of life, a simpler way of life. I love the Lord of the Rings, so the best I can compare this to is I want to be a hobbit in the Shire. Like, that's kind of the goal I'm going for here, and I really think that is more human than the humans in the Lord of the Rings. Now, there's one more bit I want to talk about here, but I'm starting to run low on time, so I got to do this part well and also quickly. So another reason why I'm interested in investigating Zen more is because there was an aspect of these teachings that Joe was talking about that either A, I'm just not at that point in my spiritual human growth to agree with it, or B, it's wrong. One or the other. Like maybe there's a middle ground answer as well, but like either I'm just not to that point to agree with it yet, or it's just wrong. A lot of my understanding of Zen comes from Jeff Bridges' character in Tron Legacy. You're messing with my Zen thing, man. It's supposed to be like very like tranquility, peace, patience, and kind of this like non-violent approach to life kind of thing. Okay, cool. I do consider myself more of a pacifist. More and more, I find myself sliding further and further into an anti-war standpoint. Free Palestine, and also no war in Iran, please. Thank you very much. Let's keep going. So, but there's this aspect in Zen and the martial arts that comes up when it comes to Zen, that you're always trying to not be engaged in combat or in a strife, even verbally or otherwise, but to look for, really, it comes off in the book more of like the path of least resistance. Like there are times where you're supposed to like just let the bad guy, or maybe not the bad guy, but like the abuser, the opponent, essentially win, so that way you can walk away, kind of thing. And in a way, I do agree with that. Like at the end of the day, the goal is to stay alive. Like I don't want to be dead. So with that, I'm not going to instigate violence. I'm not going to personally go into certain situations that I think are going to be violent or could cause harm. He does talk about in the book, there's a story, I think it might be the last chapter, where he talks about he almost got into a fight with a guy who was experiencing road rage because of a mistake that Joe made in driving, and he was able to talk his way out of the situation. Okay, that I all agree with. But there's also these like examples, a couple examples in the book that he gives, where basically you're just supposed to let people berate you. This is like verbal. This is not physical confrontation. This is verbal. Basically, you're just supposed to let people berate you and take it on the chin and move on with life in the name of preserving the peace and tranquility and Zen. I don't know if I agree with that or not. I am not a great example of somebody who will always stand up for himself. Okay, Claire didn't nod her head, so cool. I was expecting like oh, no way, I think I got a thumbs up. Okay, so I'm not the kind of person who's always going to stand up for himself. This is part of my journey right now of like learning how to not be an absolute pushover all the time. This kind of portrayed it as you should always be a pushover in order to preserve the peace. And as much as I am a pacifist and anti-war, I also live in reality, and I don't know if that actually is a measurable way that you can live all of the time, is in a state of non-violent, or again, not like violent as in combat, but violent as in verbal, like a non-verbal confrontation kind of thing. And I say that because I don't think, more and more, I have been verbally abused and emotionally manipulated by people my whole life. That comes from my close people in my family. That has come from colleagues in the podcasting world. This has come from I worked in retail for 7 years, so that was like a 8 hours a day experience for me. But like you kind of I've come to realize that like particularly with men, I don't want women and others to feel neglected in this, but particularly with men and the manosphere, toxic masculinity kind of guys, I don't know if it really is a good thing to just let those kinds of people berate you. I really don't. I am getting more and more to a place where I feel like you do need to stand up for yourself a little bit. And I think the counter argument is totally the counter argument is totally some kind of like, well, what good is that really going to do? You know, you're not going to change that person's mind. It's just going to escalate the situation. We don't want to escalate the situation. Fine, but also in learning how to stand up for myself more, I'm beginning to realize that that is an injustice and somebody should have to take a verbal swing at the guy. Like, I don't know. Like, this is the proof of the fact that I did read a book and also sat with it and tried to do some reflection on it, because I don't know. I feel like there's a clash here. Like, yes, there are absolutely times, especially when your physical life is at stake, that you kind of have to like navigate the waters very, very carefully. But more and more, I really think guys need, again, I'm speaking very directly about toxic masculinity, but I do know that women and other people experience this as well, that when it comes to toxic masculinity, I don't know, I think sometimes you have to fire back a little bit. I think you, even just to show the fact of like, no, you will not push me over. Is it going to change that person's mind? Is it going to make them a better person? No, but I think you do need to stand up for yourself. But like I said, maybe this is just me not being enlightened enough. Maybe I need to go meditate under a waterfall, because that's a thing. That's it for me. I'm not picking up a challenge off of fulfilling a challenge. No, sirree, Bob. So thanks you for listening to today's episode. And I guess check out the book. Maybe just read the first half of it. I definitely will come back to the subject of Zen at some point here on the show, because I think it could be beneficial to me. And it definitely is. It is the moving needle from just learning how to fight to using the martial arts as a way to grow as an individual. But thanks for listening to today's episode. Please rate and review this show wherever you get your podcasts. Pass this episode along to a friend, and check out the other great shows here on the Anazao Ministries Podcast Network, like Your Matter Matters, Systematic Geekology, and my sister show, My Seminary Life. You can also check out my YouTube channel, Studio 219, a place for faith and pop culture. There's also my Instagram, at KungFuPizzaPrty, and Letterboxd, KungFuPizzaPrty, where you can get reviews of the movies before the episode comes out. And that doesn't do you any good on a book review, but hey, follow the show over there. And that's it. Thank you again for listening. This has been Kung Fu Pizza Party, where I've delivered high-flying action in 30 minutes or less and served up some wisdom one slice at a time.